So let me ask. Okay. The Kern Water Bank now does it MWD store water there, so to speak, or paper water? Okay, can you explain what paper water is? Because that's in this article too. What is paper water?
Right. So, right, the actual water is how much water is flowing through the rivers, how much water is in this reservoir, how much water is under the ground in this location. Paper water refers to the series of contracts and rights and this entire legal system that has been built up to allocate and determine who gets how much water when and who pays what. And the paper water far exceeds the actual water that exists.
How is that? How can that be? That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know a lot about economics, but that doesn't make much sense.
So the way that these contracts have been drawn up, mostly they have a maximum, right? You can take up to however much, right? When we talk about water in California, we talk about acre feet, which is right. It's how much water does it take to flood an area of an acre to 1 foot of depth. So imagine a football field, roughly that's about an acre, right? Covered in one foot of water. It's over 700,000 gallons. That's what we talk about in terms of volumes. It's a lot. And then when we're talking about volumes to Southern California, particularly volumes to agriculture, we're talking about thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, in some cases millions of acre feet. These are huge volumes of water. These contracts and these rights say you can take up to X thousand acre feet or some figure, and when you add all those up, it's far beyond the amount of water that ever actually exists. And they were made in a time when people thought there would be more water, when people thought that there was no need to provide any water for the environment. And so we've just developed this, and they've never been checked. And we have this incredibly antiquated and fundamentally racist system of water rights, where the people that are sort of termed first in time, first in right. So the earlier you filed your claim, the more senior your rights are, which means that you don't get cut, basically. Everyone else gets cut before you. So the miners who showed up during the gold rush and staked claims, people who displaced Native American populations, have the oldest rights and the most power in this system.
So we're way behind we're in a different century essentially, and water management techniques. But what are the consequences, the real life consequences of the paper water concept? I mean, it seems like you've got all this paper water, but then you have a crisis, and the paper water doesn't help. So, am I right about that? I mean, that could be a catastrophe, couldn't it?
Yeah, and we've seen this actually play out. Every few years when we have a succession of dry years, right? California, even prior to climate change, right? It has a Mediterranean climate. It goes through dry swings and wet swings. And during the dry swings, there's not enough water for all of the uses. There's not enough water for the amount of agriculture going on. There's not enough water for the cities. There's not enough water for the environment. And the environment always gets shortchanged. That and the way that relates to the paper water is that while things are getting dry, year one, year two, people, right, the decision makers are still allowing the agricultural water districts, right, metropolitan, to take as much water as they can. They're delivering as much as they can, and then all of a sudden, it's year two, it's year three, it's a severe drought, and now we have to cut back. And then we get, but my right says I get this much, right? And then we get into these complex proceedings about who has to get cut and how much. And what generally ends up happening is that every time this happens, the state and the federal government that operates the system of pumps and canals comes to the regulators and says, oh, you need to waive the rules. You need to waive the environmental protections, waive the water quality rules, so that we can continue delivering the water that we've promised, and make sure that there's not too much salty water coming up through the bay into the delta, because there's not enough fresh water flowing down the rivers. Well, why is that happening? Because they've drained all the water out of the reservoirs, right? They've taken too much water out of the rivers over the preceding years, and now we have crisis. And it happened. We've seen this happen time and time again.